After the attack and burning of Cetshwayo's kraal, January 12, 1879, Lord Chelmsford, the Commander-in-Chief of British forces, continued to capture Zululand. He divided the army into 3 columns. The main centre column, consisting of approximately 7,800 men, was under his direct command. This invasion aimed to encircle the Zulu Army and force it into a decisive battle, as Chelmsford feared the Zulus might bypass the British and attack Natal. The backbone of Chelmsford's force included 12 regular infantry companies, known for their toughness and reliability. Additionally, there were about 2,500 local African auxiliaries from the Natal native contingent, many of whom were exiled or refugee Zulus. The force also comprised irregular colonial cavalry units and a detachment of artillery with 6 field guns and several Congreve rockets. Due to the urgency of their mission, Bartle Frere and Chelmsford began the invasion during the rainy season, which severely slowed the British advance. The British timed the invasion to coincide with the harvest, hoping to find the Zulu warriors dispersed. However, the Zulu king had already begun assembling his 24,000-strong army, Ulundi, for the annual first fruit ceremony. The Zulu Army, though rooted in a warrior culture, functioned primarily as a militia called upon in times of national danger. With limited logistical capacity, they could only stay in the field for a few weeks before needing to return to civilian duties. Zulu warriors were mainly armed with assegai thrusting spears and cowhide shields, with some possessing old muskets and antiquated rifles, although firearms were not widespread among them. On January 17th, the main Zulu impis crossed the White-Mfolozi River under orders to march slowly, attack at dawn, and overwhelm the British. The centre column under the command of Lord Chelmsford was approaching Isandlwana, the 2 weeks of the rainy season. The British advanced to a crawl, while the Zulu travelled lightly. The Lord Chelmsford advanced recklessly, with minimal scouting and camping without building defensive structures. Zulu, on the other hand, advanced into columns to prevent the entire force being ambushed, and extensively used scouts backed up by 1 to 200 strong warrior groups. These groups were tasked with keeping the Zulu movement secret, and when engaged and kill any interlopers the Zulu scouts discovered before their location could be reported to the enemy command. The British arrived and set up camp at the base of Isandlwana, less than 10 miles into Zululand, unaware that a massive Zulu force was camped just 7 miles away. The Zulu hid nearly 20,000 infantry in the hills, watching the British with scouts. These scouts were spotted, prompting the British to send Natal auxiliary units to scout the area. There, they encountered Zulu warrior groups, leading to minor skirmishes. These skirmishes escalated, alerting both sides to each other's presence. Believing the Natal units had encountered the vanguard of a Zulu force, Chelmsford took half of his men and pursued them. Command of the camp was assumed by Colonel Anthony Durnford, who arrived with reinforcements from Rorke's Drift. The Zulu warrior groups retreated from their camp, luring Chelmsford and half of the British force away from Isandlwana. Soon after, Natal scouts who ventured east from the camp reported the presence of Zulu forces in the hills surrounding Isandlwana. However, the British believed this to be a force of only 4,000 men. The Zulu warriors successfully screened the main force hidden behind the hills, leading the British to think this force was maneuvering to flank Lord Chelmsford. Anthony Durnford led a cavalry force and an artillery battery to root out the Zulus, leaving Lieutenant Colonel Henry Pauline in command of the camp. Meanwhile, the Zulus sent a force to outflank Isandlwana and planned to attack the following day. However, the British cavalry chased the Zulu scouts back to their camp, revealing that there were not 4,000 Zulus hidden in the mountains as they had thought, but 20,000. With their force discovered, the Zulus' plans were unveiled. The orders to charge were given and the Zulus surged towards the British. The Zulu charge quickly became uncontrollable as they rushed down the hills towards the British camp. The British formed an extended firing line to meet the attack. Despite inflicting heavy casualties and stalling the Zulu advance with disciplined volleys and artillery fire, the Zulu left Horn maneuvered to outflank the British. They had not expected any action until the next day and were unprepared for an immediate attack. However, the disciplined Zulu forces quickly and independently formed their standard attack formation, with a large central body advancing directly, while the Horns spread out to encircle the surprised British. Durnford's men, fighting the longest, began to retreat, leading to hand-to-hand combat in the British camp. The cavalry formed a skirmishing line, using rifle fire to keep the Zulu at bay. However, their retreat soon outpaced the rocket battery, which was subsequently overrun. At camp, Pauline took defensive measures. He reinforced the hill, positioned the cannons for firing, and formed a line of battle as a Zulu force of 10,000 men crested the ridge across the valley. The British suddenly realized that made a huge mistake on the ridge. The Zulu left Horn moved to seize the high ground and outflank their enemy. At this point, many of the Natal auxiliaries fled. Lacking rifles, they faced the daunting prospect of hand-to-hand combat against Zulu warriors who outnumbered them 20-1. The British forces on the hill conducted a fighting retreat, meeting reinforcements at the base. In the center, the Zulus were forced to take shelter from British fire, using dry riverbeds or the ground for cover. Several Zulu regiments were pinned behind small hills due to the cannon fire. Unlike the crude ball throwers of the American Revolutionary War, these cannons were rifled, long-range weapons equipped with explosive shells. On the right, the cavalry regrouped on the banks of a dried riverbed, using the natural barrier to cut down the Zulu. The British appeared to be winning, and their morale was high. However, things quickly turned for the worse. The cavalry, running low on ammunition and unable to hold their position without resupply, mounted up and rushed back to camp. Seeing the British on the right retreating, the Zulu chiefs commanding the Horn urged their men forward. There were too many Zulu for the British to repel, leaving their right wing undefended. The British fell back and tightened their ranks, giving ground to distance themselves from Zulu spears, while moving closer to their ammunition stores. Seizing the opportunity during the brief confusion, the British maneuvered. The Zulu warriors from the left Horn rushed the British line and broke through, creating a gap in the firing line. Zulus surged in from the left and the right, where the British were exhausted and still low on ammunition. Meanwhile, the Zulu Horn maintained pressure on the British centre, preventing them from redeploying to cover the breaks in their flanks. The British line collapsed, the Zulus flooded in from all directions. The British fought desperately, forming squares and battling to the last man. Despite their valiant efforts, the British were overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the Zulu warriors. Hand-to-hand combat ensued, with no quarter given on either side. As the battle raged on, British casualties mounted rapidly, and the camp was soon overrun. The once organised British ranks disintegrated into pockets of fierce resistance, but they were ultimately no match for the relentless Zulu assault. By the end of the day, the battlefield was strewn with the fallen, marking a devastating defeat for the British at Isandlwana. The survivors fled, with the Zulus in pursuit. The British force was almost entirely destroyed, with only 60 of the 800 British escaping and nearly 500 of their Natal auxiliaries killed. Although King Cetshwayo had ordered his warriors not to pursue into Natal, a 4,000-strong reserve disobeyed and crossed into Natal, attacking the mission at Rorke's Drift. But this is a story for another day.